Her hotel housekeeper, invisible to most guests, leaves a simple thank you note for a stranger. 7 words on a piece of paper. That's all it took to change everything. But here's what she didn't know. The man reading her note wasn't just any guest. He was a CEO worth millions, desperately searching for someone worthy of inheriting his empire. Someone who could see what others couldn't. Someone with a heart that money can't buy. What happened next will make you question everything you think you know about success, talent, and the power of genuine kindness. This story will leave you breathless, and I promise you, the twist at the end will stay with you long after you've heard it. In the heart of Charleston, where secrets hide behind every wrought iron gate and Spanish moss whispers tales of forgotten dreams, stood the Magnolia Inn, a boutique hotel that held more mysteries than its guests could ever imagine. Every morning, at 5:30 while Charleston slept, Lana Gray would slip through the hotel's back entrance, like a ghost carrying dreams she dared not speak aloud. At 28, she had perfected the art of invisibility, not by choice but by necessity. Her calloused hands told the story of a girl who had learned too young that being seen often meant being judged, and being judged meant being found. Wanting, but here's what nobody knew about the quiet girl with downcast eyes. Lana Gray possessed a gift so rare that it would soon turn a millionaire's world upside down. Her father, a simple electrician with artist's hands, had left her 2 things before his heart gave out: an unshakable belief in dignity through honest work and an old film camera that would become her window to magic. While others saw her as just another housekeeper, Lana saw the world through a lens that captured souls. During stolen moments between scrubbing floors and changing sheets, she would venture into Charleston's hidden corners with that camera, hunting for beauty that others trampled past without noticing. The homeless veteran sharing his last sandwich with a stray dog, the businessman weeping over a photo of his deceased wife, the teenage mother singing lullabies to calm her crying baby on a park bench. These weren't just photographs. They were love letters to humanity's hidden grace. Photography had once been her burning dream. She had imagined herself as a photojournalist, traveling to distant lands and telling stories that mattered. But dreams, she had learned through years of rejection letters and closed doors, were luxuries reserved for people with the right connections, the right education, the right everything she would never have. What Lana couldn't possibly know was that fate was about to deliver the most unexpected gift. Someone who would finally see her the way she saw the world, with wonder, with reverence, with the recognition that true talent can't be taught in any classroom. The hotel's ordinary rhythm shattered on a Tuesday morning when someone checked into room 314, someone who would change everything. The reservation seemed innocent enough. G. Miles, 2. Weeks, no special requests. But Emma Hawthorne, the hotel's razor-sharp administrative manager, sensed something different about this guest the moment she saw his understated elegance and the way he observed everything with calculating eyes. What Emma didn't realize was that she was staring into the face of her future destroyer. Gavin Miles looked nothing like the billionaire he was. At 42, with weathered hands and graying temples, most people mistook him for a college professor, or maybe a writer. They had no idea they were looking at the mastermind behind Miles & Co., a hotel empire spanning dozens of properties across the nation. But Gavin carried a secret that his board of directors couldn't understand. Every few months he would abandon his corner office and designer suits to become a ghost in his own hotels. He would check in under false names, live among his staff and guests, watching, learning, searching for something that had become extinct in his industry, authentic human connection. And he was searching for something even more precious, not someone with an MBA or family money, but someone who understood that true hospitality wasn't about thread counts and profit margins. Said it was about seeing people, really seeing them, and caring enough to make their temporary refuge feel like home. Gavin was a widower with no children, and time was running out. He needed to find someone worthy of inheriting not just his fortune but his life's mission. Someone who possessed the rarest quality of all, the ability to recognize the extraordinary hiding within the ordinary. As Lana cleaned room 314 that first morning, her heart nearly stopped. There, partially hidden beneath the guest's leather notebook, was a book that seemed to glow with significance. Vivian Heir, Street Photographer. The pages were dog-eared, the margins filled with careful annotations in handwriting that spoke of someone who truly understood art. Lana's hands trembled as she dusted around the book. Vivian Heir, the mysterious nanny who had walked the streets of Chicago and New York, capturing extraordinary moments while remaining utterly invisible herself. A woman whose genius was only discovered after death, when thousands of undeveloped photographs revealed one of the most profound artistic visions of the 20th century. Standing in that hotel room, surrounded by cleaning supplies and the scent of lemon polish, Lana felt a connection so powerful it took her breath away. This unknown guest understood something that no one in her life had ever grasped, that brilliance could exist in the shadows, that the most important stories were often told by those society chose to ignore. Before courage could abandon her, Lana pulled out a piece of hotel stationery. Her pen hovered over the paper for a moment that felt like eternity. Then, in her careful, honest script, she wrote words that would detonate like a bomb in the quiet life of Gavin Miles. Thank you for the book about Vivian Heir. She helps me believe that invisible people can still tell stories with light. She signed it simply, Lana Gray. As she placed the note beside the book, her hands shaking with the magnitude of what she had just done, Lana had no idea that she had just lit the fuse on a revolution that would change not just her own destiny, but the fate of everyone in that hotel. The invisible girl had just made herself seen by the one person who mattered most. When Gavin Miles found that note, everything changed. He read it once, twice, then sat in stunned silence as the words burned themselves into his memory. In 30 years of business, through countless hotels and thousands of interactions, no one, not executives, not consultants, not marketing experts, had ever spoken to him with such raw, authentic understanding. 7 words had just shattered his world. Invisible people can still tell stories with light. This wasn't corporate speak or polite pleasantries. This was the voice of an artist, a soul who understood that true vision had nothing to do with status or education. Someone who knew, bone deep, what it meant to be overlooked while possessing extraordinary gifts. The name Lana Gray became an obsession, but Gavin was no ordinary observer. He was a hunter, and he had just caught the scent of something precious. Over the next few days, he transformed from guest to detective, watching the hotel's ecosystem with the intensity of a predator studying its prey. What he discovered would have made Emma Hawthorne's blood run cold if she had known. Gavin saw everything. He watched Emma's performance change like a chameleon depending on her audience, all sugar and smiles for guests with designer luggage, cold efficiency for families with crying children, barely concealed disdain for anyone she deemed beneath her notice. He observed her subtle campaign of psychological warfare against Lana, the way she would steal credit for the girl's innovations and redistribute Lana's favorite assignments to less capable staff. But Emma had made a critical error. She had underestimated the very person she was trying to destroy. Gavin began following Lana during her breaks, maintaining careful distance as she wandered Charleston's forgotten corners with her camera. What he witnessed was nothing short of miraculous. This supposedly uneducated housekeeper possessed an artistic eye that rivaled masters he had seen in galleries worth millions. He watched her photograph a homeless veteran sharing his sandwich with a stray dog, but somehow, through her lens, the image became a testament to human dignity rather than an exploitation of poverty. He saw her capture a young mother teaching her daughter to tie shoes on church steps, transforming a mundane moment into poetry. Each photograph revealed someone who didn't just see the world, she saw into its soul. But Gavin also noticed something that made his blood pressure rise. Mrs. Lois, the 76-year-old widow who had been living at the hotel for months, was clearly being neglected by everyone except Lana. While Emma barely acknowledged the old woman's existence, Lana would spend precious minutes of her break time simply talking with her, treating her not as an inconvenience, but as a human being worth knowing. Mrs. Lois had been married 50 years before losing her husband, and now she faced each day with the particular loneliness that comes from outliving your other half. But when Lana was near, something in the old woman's face would lighten, They would discuss photography, sharing stories about light and shadow, about the way memories could be preserved in silver and chemicals. "You know," Mrs. Lois had told Lana one afternoon, "my Harold used to say that cameras don't take pictures. They reveal truths. I think you understand that better than most people half your age with fancy degrees." What Mrs. Lois didn't reveal was that she had been watching Gavin watching Lana, and her shrewd old eyes had begun to see patterns that others missed. The explosion came on a Thursday morning that started like any other, but would end in devastation. Gavin had left his father's vintage Rolex, worth more than most people's cars, on his bathroom counter while he showered. In the chaos of his morning routine, he forgot it when he left for his walk through the city. When he returned 2 hours later, the watch was gone. Emma arrived at his room within minutes of his call. Her eyes bright with an excitement she tried to disguise as professional concern. This was the moment she had been unconsciously waiting for, a chance to eliminate the threat that Lana Gray represented to her carefully constructed kingdom. "I'm devastated this happened on my watch, Mr. Miles," Emma said, already producing incident reports with suspicious efficiency. "We'll conduct a thorough investigation immediately. Can you tell me which staff members had access to your room this morning?" When Gavin mentioned seeing Lana's cleaning cart in the hallway, Emma's face transformed with an expression that would have been recognizable to any predator. The look of prey, finally within striking distance. "Lana Gray," Emma repeated, and her voice carried undertones that made Gavin's skin crawl. "I have to be honest with you, Mr. Miles. While I hate to speak negatively about any employee, there have been some concerns about her reliability lately. She's been distracted, carrying that camera around, sometimes leaving work unfinished because she gets caught up in her hobby." The word hobby dripped with disdain, and in that moment, Gavin saw Emma clearly for the first time, not as a professional manager, but as someone whose entire identity was built on keeping others beneath her. What happened next would haunt everyone involved. Emma summoned Lana to room 314 with the coldness of an executioner, calling for the condemned. When Lana arrived, her face pale with confusion and growing dread, Emma delivered her accusation with surgical precision. "Lana, Mr. Miles is missing a valuable watch from his bathroom. You were scheduled to clean this room this morning. I need you to tell me exactly what you saw and did." Gavin watched Lana's face crumble as the implication hit her. This wasn't a question. It was an accusation wrapped in professional language. And in that moment, he saw something that made his chest tighten with rage. Lana didn't look like someone who had been caught stealing. She looked like someone whose heart was being murdered in front of witnesses. I cleaned the bathroom thoroughly," Lana whispered, her voice barely audible. "But there was no watch on the counter. I would have seen it. I always notice everything." "That's exactly what someone would say if they took it," Emma replied with the efficiency of someone who had rehearsed this moment. "Lana, I think it's best if you take unpaid leave while we investigate. We'll need to search your locker and personal belongings immediately." And here was the moment that would define everyone's character. Lana agreed to the humiliation without protest. She handed over her keys, submitted to having her few possessions rifled through, and accepted the destruction of her reputation with the quiet dignity of someone who had been expecting this kind of betrayal her entire life. "I understand," she said, her voice breaking only slightly. "I'll clear out my things." But as Lana walked toward the door, something extraordinary happened. Mrs. Lois appeared in the hallway, and the old woman's eyes were blazing with a fury that transformed her from a fragile widow into an avenging angel. "You," she said, pointing one shaking finger at Emma, "are about to make the biggest mistake of your pathetic little life." He found the elderly woman in the hotel's small garden, feeding breadcrumbs to the sparrows that gathered there each afternoon. When he approached, she looked up with the sharp intelligence that age sometimes brings to those who have learned to see clearly. "You're the gentleman in 314, she said. "It wasn't a question?" "Yes, ma'am. I wanted to ask you about Lana Gray." Mrs. Lois studied his face for a long moment. "Are you the one who's been asking questions about her? The one who left?" "That book about Vivian Maya?" Gavin nodded, surprised by her directness. "That girl," Mrs. Lois said, turning back to the sparrows, "has more integrity in her little finger than most people have in their entire bodies. If someone told you she stole something, they're lying. And if you believe them without getting to know her first, then you don't deserve to understand what she sees through that camera of hers." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small memory card. "I had her help me transfer some of my husband's old photographs to digital format, but she also put some of her own work on here. I think you should see it before you make anti-judgments about who she really is." That evening, Gavin sat in his room with his laptop, inserting the memory card Mrs. Lois had given him. What he saw in the next hour changed everything. He thought he knew about talent, about seeing, and about the quiet dignity of unnoticed lives. The photographs were extraordinary, not because of expensive equipment or technical perfection, but because of the eye behind the lens. Lana had captured the soul of the hotel and the city around it, with the same intuitive genius that had made Vivian Meyer's work so compelling decades after her death. There were pictures of guests in unguarded moments, an elderly businessman, on the phone with what was clearly a grandchild, his stern face transformed by love and laughter, a young couple having their first fight, then making up in the hotel lobby, their body language telling a story of forgiveness and growth. Emma herself, caught in a moment when she thought no one was watching, her professional mask slipping, to reveal something calculating and cold. But it was the final series of photographs that made Gavin's breath catch. They were pictures of him, taken over the past week during his walks around Charleston. Not invasive paparazzi shots, but respectful observations of a person moving through the world. Lana had captured him feeding coins to a street musician, helping a lost tourist with directions, sitting alone on a park bench with his notebook, lost in thought. In these photographs, Gavin saw himself as others might see him, not as a powerful CEO, but as a fellow human being navigating the complexity of daily life. The pictures were filled with empathy and understanding, showing someone who had watched carefully enough to see past appearances to the person underneath. The next morning, Gavin made a decision that would surprise everyone, including himself. Instead of quietly returning to his corporate life and filing away this experience as an interesting observation, he chose to act on what he had discovered. He called Emma to his room and informed her that he had found his watch. He watched her face carefully as he explained that it had simply fallen out of sight, and he noted how her expression shifted from surprise to disappointment to a quick recalculation of her next move. "Well, that's wonderful news," Emma said, her smile returning. "I'll call Lana immediately and let her know she can return to work. I'm sure this whole thing was just an unfortunate misunderstanding." "Actually," Gavin said, "I'd like to handle that conversation myself. But first I have a question for you. What do you think makes someone valuable to an organization like this?" Emma straightened, sensing an opportunity to impress what she believed was an important guest. "Education, certainly. Professional development. The ability to maintain standards and represent the brand appropriately. Someone who understands that hospitality is about creating the right image for our clientele." Gavin nodded thoughtfully. "And what would you say about someone who notices when a guest is lonely and takes time to talk with them? Someone who arranges flowers not because it's required, but because beauty matters. Someone who sees the dignity in every person who walks through these doors." "Well, those things are nice," Emma said carefully. "But in today's competitive market, we need people who can think strategically, who have the background to understand complex business relationships." "I see," Gavin said. "Thank you for your perspective." After Emma left, Gavin sat quietly for several minutes, thinking about leadership, about legacy, and about the difference between managing people and truly seeing them. Then he made several phone calls. The first call was to his assistant in New York, asking her to make some specific arrangements for the following day. The second was to a local printing company, requesting their fastest service for a small but important project. The third was to Mrs. Lois, asking if she might be available for a conversation about art, dignity, and second chances. That afternoon, while Emma was handling check-ins at the front desk, Gavin found Lana in the hotel's small employee break room. She was sitting alone, still in her work uniform but no longer wearing her employee badge. Her camera sat on the table beside her, and she was looking through a small album of photographs, probably deciding which ones to keep and which ones to leave behind. "Miss Gray," Gavin said gently. Lana looked up and he could see that she had been crying, though she had tried to hide it. "Oh, Mr. Miles, I'm so sorry about your watch. I know they found it, but I'm sorry you had to go through that worry because of the confusion about my work." "Lana," Gavin said, sitting down across from her, "I need to tell you something. I'm not just a guest at this hotel." Over the next 20 minutes, Gavin explained who he was and why he had been there. He told her about his practice of observing, his properties from the ground level, about his search for people who understood that hospitality was about humanity, not just service. "I've been watching you work," he said, "and I've seen your photographs. I need to ask you something important. Do you believe that your background, the fact that you didn't go to college, that you work cleaning rooms, do you believe that makes you less capable of seeing clearly than someone with a business degree?" Lana was quiet for a long time. "I've always been told that it does," she finally said, "that without the right education, without the right experience, I couldn't understand how the world really works." "What if I told you that's exactly backwards?" Gavin asked. "What if I told you that sometimes the people who understand the world most clearly are the ones who haven't been taught to stop seeing it?" The next morning, Gavin asked the hotel staff to gather in the lobby for what he called a guest appreciation presentation. Emma was excited, believing this important guest was going to praise the hotel's service publicly. Instead, Gavin had arranged for a series of large prints to be displayed throughout the lobby, Lana's photographs of the hotel, the guests, and the life of Charleston that surrounded them. Each photograph was labeled simply with the title Lana had given it, and the phrase, "The Invisible Guests, a Visual Story by Lana Gray." The photographs transformed the lobby into something resembling a gallery, and the effect was immediate and powerful. Guests stopped their conversations to study the images. Staff members saw their workplace reflected back to them with new dignity and meaning. Even the custodial staff, usually invisible to hotel guests, found themselves looking at Lana's work with recognition and pride. Mrs. Lois stood beside one photograph, a picture of herself feeding the sparrows in the garden, but captured in such a way that her solitude seemed contemplative rather than lonely, her age reflecting wisdom rather than decline. "You see me," she whispered to Lana, tears in her eyes. "You really see me." Gavin stepped forward to address the gathered crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I have an announcement to make. My name is Gavin Miles, and I'm the CEO of Miles & Cakes, the company that owns this hotel and many others like it." The room fell silent. Emma's face went through a series of expressions that Gavin would remember for years afterward. "I've been here for 2 weeks," Gavin continued, "learning about this property not as an executive but as a guest. What I've discovered is that hospitality, real hospitality, isn't about luxury amenities or profit margins. It's about seeing people, all people. It's about understanding that every person who walks through our doors has a story worth respecting, a dignity worth honoring." He turned to Lana, who was standing beside her photographs, looking stunned and overwhelmed. "Miss Gray, I'd like to offer you a position with Miles & Co. as our Director of Guest Experience through Visual Storytelling. Your job would be to help us understand our properties and our guests through your lens, to ensure that we never lose sight of the humanity that should be at the center of everything we do." The room erupted in applause, but Gavin held up his hand. He wasn't finished. "However," he said, looking directly at Emma, "this position comes with some changes. We'll be restructuring the management of this property to ensure that every staff member is valued for their contributions, not judged by their educational background or personal circumstances." Emma's career at the hotel ended that day, not because of any single dramatic confrontation, but because Gavin had seen through her photographs and observations that her approach to leadership was fundamentally incompatible with the values he wanted his company to represent. Mrs. Lois approached Lana as the crowd was dispersing, carrying something wrapped in soft cloth. "I want you to have this," she said, unveiling her husband's Leica camera. "Harold would have loved your work. He always said that the best cameras find their way to the people who understand that photography isn't about the equipment, it's about the heart behind the lens. Lana accepted the camera with trembling hands, understanding that she was receiving not just a tool, but a legacy of seeing the world with love and attention. 3 months later, Lana's work had transformed. Not just the Magnolia Inn, but the entire approach of Miles & Co. Her photographs were used in the company's marketing, but more importantly, her perspective influenced how they trained staff, how they designed guest experiences, and how they understood their role in the communities they served. The shy girl, who had once been invisible, had become the eyes through which an entire company learned to see.